What's going on, YouTube? This is Ipsec, and I want to tell a story about a web pen test I did a couple months back. I think it was in July. Specifically, it was an API pen test, and I thought I found a SQL injection in the URL. I put a single quote, it errored out. I put a single quote, then two hyphens, and it didn't error. So that's like telling me I have SQL injection. That being said, whenever I tried to exfil any data by doing a union or anything else, it would error. I could never get it to work. I went and tried SQLMap with all the tamper scripts, and it still told me it was a false positive. I went over to Burpsuite Professional, it couldn't exploit it. I also have a copy of, I think it's called Injecting now, but it was NetSparker a long time ago, and it also just failed to exploit this injection. So I was thinking there was some web application firewall in play or something that was just blocking requests. So I used FFUF to look for bad characters by putting a character after the SQL comment, because that shouldn't change my query at all. And I did find some bad characters, namely one being the comma. And the comma was used in almost every SQL payload because that's how you separate columns you want to extract. And if the union has like 4 columns you want to extract, you need commas, at least so I thought. I asked ChatGPT if there's a way to do a union select statement without commas, and it told me it wasn't possible. So when that happens, I went to reading a lot of the documentation around MySQL, and I was just drawing a lot of blanks. I asked a good friend, Tiberius, who is one of the better web pen testers I know, and after talking for a bit, we came up with a technique. But once we came up with the technique, we knew what to Google, and it was on Hacktricks already. So we didn't discover anything new. We just didn't know how to search for what we wanted, which is a common thing in this industry. So I could just go and paste exactly what the syntax is. This is like the trick of doing this SQL injection. You do this weird as A, as B joins. But that doesn't really teach you much other than the technique. So I want to take more time in typical IPSec fashion and try to go through the entire thought process of that day, sum it up into just a 30-minute video, and hopefully you can learn from that. Because if you just learn techniques, one of 3 things, or well, I guess 4 things are happening. You could just remember the technique and it helps you. But there's a good chance that you forget the technique, or something doesn't work out of the box and you don't know how to modify the technique to adapt. I've been doing web pen testing for almost 2 decades now, and I still learn new things, or at least new to me at this time, because there's plenty of times I do something, I'm like, man, I just learned this, and then go back like 6 or 7 years and be like, oh, wait, I learned it way back then and just forgot. So we're going to take a lot more time and try to build the foundations and learn the technique so you understand exactly what this means if you don't already. To do that, I did build a Python application to kind of mimic what I had saw on the web app. And if you want to follow along by yourself, I do have a CTF script repository. I decided I just put this in here, and it is in this Dockers. So you can build it yourself. If you just do a Docker build, there is a Docker file for this, but I don't like running it in Docker. It's just easier for me to run the app in VS Code and debug, set breakpoints, all that type of stuff if I'm not in Docker. I know there's probably a way to hook VS Code into Docker and have it do that, but I'm a simple man, right? So let's go take a look at this actual application. I have it running here. It is going to be a Flask app, and it is using MySQL. I'm not sure if this works for SQLite. It probably does. I think there's a demo I want to do on a different video that requires MySQL, so that's why I put that as a requirement. Then you have 2 functions here. This is just slash. It's going to get all the posts in the database, and you can get single post in the database. Nothing really vulnerable here. We can look at the database, I guess, so you can get an idea of what it is. I only have 1 post. It has a title of please subscribe, and the content of the post is to my channel. And then we have a user. The username is Ipsec. So right here is going to be where the vulnerability occurs. And if you ever see raw SQL in code nowadays, it's probably going to be bad, or maybe it's Golang, which doesn't really have a good ORM. This is kind of why SQL injections fell off the face of the earth, or they're not as common in web apps anymore. Because when they were popular, a lot of people were writing raw SQL by hand and not using prepared statements. But now that they've started using frameworks like Laravel and PHP, SQL Alchemy and Flask and Django, I think it probably uses it as well. You just don't have SQL injection because most developers know this syntax better than they know SQL. It's not as efficient, but it's safer and more intuitive, right? So I'm telling the DB to query the post table and filter it where post ID is the user supplied parameter. There's no SQL injection in here. But here we do have SQL injection. We have the select star from users where username is equal to just raw input here. We should do like an escape or even better, a prepared statement, which we'll cover later in the video, but we don't. So this is where the injection occurs. And you see these red squigglies. You may be thinking that is syntax error, but no. My IDE, or VS Code technically isn't an IDE, but for all intents and purposes, I think it is. We have it saying there's an SQL injection. How does it do it? Well, that's thanks to this video sponsor, Snyk. Snyk is a platform that scans your code, dependencies, containers, and stuff to help you find vulnerabilities in real time, and also it helps fix them. So you saw I just scanned open source security is going to look at like requirements.txt, look for any vulnerabilities in libraries I use, and then the code security is actually going to scan the code and find the vulnerabilities. So here we have it finding a SQL injection, and then it recommends fixes for them. So this is using the MySQL DB escape string. If we look at another fix, and it's using it from other open source products. It's not going into your product and saying change your code. It's just these are how other people have fixed them. This is using MySQL, a different library. And then here you probably have the correct thing, which is using a prepared statement. We'll fix the code up in the end of this video. It wouldn't make sense to fix it now and then not be able to exploit it, right? So if you want to use Snyk, if you don't know how to get it hooked into your IDE, I do have this video here installing VS Code with Copilot and Snyk via Ansible. And also, if you don't use it when you sign up, please go to snyk.co/ipsec. It is free, and this is an affiliate link, so I do get some credit for bringing you to the platform. So now that that is said, let's go over the rest of this code. There is going to be a trick. Let me just stop the web server because we don't need it running. This right now, if you throw it to SQLMap, it's going to say it's not vulnerable. We can prove that real quick. So let's just do, let's send it over to Burpsuite so we can play with it. So intercept is on. And then we can go over to a browser. Let's do localhost 5000 user IPsec. Now we have to start the application. I don't know why I had stopped it. So I'll press F5, run it, and we get the thing back. I probably should have removed the password because that's not realistic for it to tell you the password, but oh well. I'm going to turn Burpsuite on. It is intercepting, so let's refresh. Go over to the repeater tab. We hit it and we see IPsec. If I do a single quote, I'm going to get a very verbose error. We probably should disable it because this is going to say exactly what it is. Let's just show this what this looks like in the web browser. This is the wonderful workzug error. If we had a LFI or a file disclosure, not LFI, to leak some files off the box, we could steal the pin code. If you want, you can just go to ipsec.rocks, LFI pin, and get that. But this is going to tell us exactly what we have. This is why you should never have errors in production, because it tells us exactly what it is. It's an SQL error, and it gives us the query. So we could easily, from this, know it's vulnerable for sure. So I'm going to go ahead and disable debug mode because you shouldn't see that in production. And Snyk also will warn me, I think, that it is. Yeah, that is a medium finding. Tells me to turn debug to false. So we can do that. Save it. F5 to rerun. So now when I do a single quote, we get a internal server error. So now let's go over to SQLMap. So I'm going to do SQLMap -u. And this is another thing that I had struggled with, is how to get a injection inside the URL, because SQLMap generally likes to see it in parameters. And this isn't a easy parameter find, right? So I'm going to do user, and then we can specify star here. And then we can say risk 3, level 5. I'm going to speed it up by saying the DBMS is MySQL. You guys know that is true because we saw it in the code. So it says we found a custom injection marker. Do you want to process it? Yes. And then the first page it tries is a 404. If we go here, we see it just try to get user //. If we do a invalid username, so we'll just do I, or if we do // it goes not found. So we need to put some data here, but we can tell SQLMap to go ahead and ignore that. So it's asking, do we want to quit and make sure everything's okay? Nope, we already validated exactly what happened, so we're going to do no. And then it found other non-custom parameters. Do you want to proceed? Yes, we do. So now we have it going and trying all the SQL injection. You can see it down here just flying along. So how I discovered this injection is we had this, and I didn't know what valid data was. So I put the single quote, and it got an error. And then I did a -- like this, and it didn't work. Actually, I did a space. And when I press Control U, hold on, Control U to URL encode, it had a bad message request. Oh, no. When I do a space, it's a bad message request because space is invalid in URLs. URL encoded, it is a plus or a %20. And this is going to be really weird. This is a weird Burpsuite quirk. If we go to convert selection URL and encode key characters, it's a plus. What happens if we do the other encode? Convert selection URL all characters. It's %20. I got lucky in that because pluses just didn't work for this. We get internal server error, but %20 is just fine. So if I do a union select 1, and this is how I went about it. Let's just do convert URL, all characters. Oh man, that sucks. %20. That's the downside. I wish key characters did that. We get internal server error. That's not surprising because we have an unbalanced thing between sides of this. If we look at the actual output, we likely have 4 columns: ID, username, password, email. So we can do select 1, 2, 3, 4, and we always get internal server error. So if we look at the code, we can see exactly what is going on. Going back over here, it's checking if it's a false positive, doesn't seem to be injectable, and it completely errored. I think if we gave it a result that had data, so if I put IPSEC here, SQLMap's going to tell me a little bit more. So I'm going to do that while we explain some more things. Always try to have some types of recon going on in the background. It's always a good habit to have. So I wanted to show you the code on why this isn't exploiting. So if we look, we have this wrapper here, validate username. And I'm using something called Pydantic. So if I go in the code, we can look at models, and we have this name model. And that's going to force the parameter username to be a string between 1 and 256 characters. So if I change this to 12, it's going to make injection really hard because all our payloads have to be under 12 characters. So Pydantic is mainly probably performance and other things, but it also helps a lot of security. I had made a Fast API app interact with Mongo, and I tried to make it vulnerable. But Mongo injection or NoSQL injection requires you sending an object, and you send that object via JSON. So when Node.js, whatever you're doing, interacts with it, it converts it to an object, and then you send the object to the Mongo database and do injection. When I did this in Fast API with Pydantic, I had the parameter as a string because that's generally how you do SQL or NoSQL statements. And when I sent it to JSON, it just flattened it out to a string, and it wasn't vulnerable. I couldn't use Pydantic and have it vulnerable to NoSQL injection. So that was really cool. And then we go one step further and have a validator. It's going to look at the username parameter and make sure it contains these characters. So not only do we enforce that it's a string, we require these characters, and since comma is not here, it's going to raise an error. If we look at this, let's see, order by technique appears usable. So SQLMap, now that I gave it a valid thing, it says there's 4 columns. We'll go into exactly how SQLMap found that in a minute, but I want to talk a little bit more about Pydantic. So if you don't understand what I mean about strict typing, I think I have a script in here. I do. So I have a very simple thing. We're just going to import Pydantic, the base model, and we have name and string. So if I do a Python 3-i on this, then we can set our user. So what I did is just put me in it ran the script and then put me in a Python console. So now I am going to do this. This is like me selecting from the database or accepting user input. And I specified age as a string. So if I do user.age, I get an int. If I do user.name, it shows me the single quotes around it. So that's a string. We could do type user.age and it gives me an int, right? But I defined it as a string. So let's just do age is equal to 30. Since I'm not doing the user object, I'm not in Pydantic. I just want to show Python will default this to string because I used quotes. So that is just Pydantic enforcing the static type of what I want. Also, if later on the code changed, Python will happily change the type of variable over to an int because it redefined it. So that is Pydantic in a nutshell. Now that we know that, I'm going to take this generic error off and put just this value error. So now if we did something and sent a invalid character, let's do a comma. We have to restart the app, of course. And I'm going to send a comma. We do get a validation error now. This will just be for us so we know if something goes wrong. We didn't just crash the app. It's a nice error. So what did I want to show now? Oh, SQLMap. So SQLMap did tell us there were 4 columns, and it used, I want to say it used order by. I don't see it right here, but we can go over exactly how that worked. So if we do go back, delete this. So a payload is just this. Well, SQLMap did a order %20 by %20 and then 1. And that's going to use the first column. In this case, it's probably ID. We got null, so it worked. We could also do it if we had ipsec here. It returns the data. But we only have 1 user, so order is not going to do anything. 2, we're ordering by the name. 3, we're ordering by the password because that's the third column. 4, ordering by the email. When we do 5, it crashes because there is no 5th thing to order by, so it returns an error message. 6, again, whatever. So that's how SQLMap could determine there were 4 columns, but it couldn't export anything because of the commas. So now let's see, what do we want to do? We did Pydantic, we did this. I guess now is the time to talk about the bad characters. So the next thing I had done is I determined, okay, there is some type of WAF here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to use FFUF, and we can do -u, put in the URL. Let's see, probably have to put this in that. Actually, generally how I use FFUF is I copy the request. So I can just do v, I'm going to make a new directory. Let's just do this in dev shm. V request user.request. Yeah, that's fine. Oh, that's ugly. I probably should have used Burpsuite copy to file because we have to kill all these line breaks. I always forgot that the copy and paste does that. Okay, this looks good. And then here, at the end, we can put fuzz. So now I want to do FFUF-request user.request-request proto http-w for word list opt sec list fuzzing, and then there's probably a special characters, right? There is. We can see only these characters return a status code 200. Everything else probably returns a 400. And this is telling me that comma is a bad character. If we do match request, or is it match code 400? There we go. We can see all the bad characters, and a comma is on this list. So this is how I did it. This is how I normally find bad characters. I just go over to FUF, or I may just manually go and try things. So if we do A, okay, comma, 400, star, okay, double quote, 400. So that could be another way, but FUF I generally find is much quicker and reliable. I'm guessing it goes up in time because that is Flask and like my Python web server going slow because I'm not running it in like UVI corn or anything that would thread it. I'm not sure exactly why the duration is going longer, but oh well. So now that we know the comma is a bad character, this is where I asked Tiberius for some help, and he showed me a site that was really cool. It was SQLFiddle. So if you don't know SQL and you want to learn injection, or you just want to learn SQL, this is a great site. I'm going to just do view sample fiddle, and it's going to build a database for me, and then give me a SQL statement over here. If I want to change languages, I can change various things. So if I just click on run SQL, it gives me the output. We're going to get rid of this and do select star from docs. It's lowercase, like this. And we have everything here. I'm going to change a few things because the ID was not 1 to 4. I like ID being unique. So it wants us to build the schema before we can run it again. There we go. So then we can do where ID is equal to 1, like this. And we execute, and we just get the first thing. So this is where the SQL injection comes in, right? We have user input here. So this is why we put the single quote in, because we are interacting at this spot. We put a single quote and then a comment. So the quote by the application gets tossed away. And I don't know what this error is. If I do build schema again, execute. Okay, that worked. I have no clue what happened there. So we can do union select 1, 2, 3 because it's getting 3 parameters. Run SQL. It's executing, and there we go. It ran. And we can see it returned 2 rows. So sometimes when doing injection and it only pulls the first result, your union doesn't get anything. The easy fix to that is make sure the ID returns nothing. So there's no document with ID 0. Then when we run it, our injection or union is the only thing. And of course, you can put text here if you put it in quotes. So like test is going to go here. And then you can do just nested SQL like this if you wanted to, like get data from other tables. But you should know that if you watch enough of my videos. If you don't, go to ipsec.rocks, type SQL injection, and I'm sure you will find plenty of videos. So now the trick, we want to be able to do this union select without any commas. So how we can do that is put this select. Let's get rid of this. Can I make this any bigger? We're going to do select star from, and then another parenthesis, and select 1. And then do as A. And then a join. And then select 2 as B. And then a join. And then a select 3 as C. And we don't need a join because we only have 3 things we want to inject. So we run SQL. executes, and we have the injection. We could put text here because ABC, or we can do please subscribe like this. And this behaves just as a union. So instead of the commas, we're doing this as something, and this really just gets thrown away. The as a doesn't matter. This is just required as per the syntax. We're essentially assigning it to a variable that we never use. But if we didn't have it and just did all these selects and joins, we have an error. Each derived table must have its own alias. So the join is like comma. So we're making another statement and going here. So hopefully this makes sense, or you can at least build your own payload. So let's take this and go back to Burpsuite. So we want to do a space here, union, select star from, and then we can do select one as A, join, select two as B, join, and I did not close this parenthesis. Select three as C, then of course join, and we have 4 parameters, so we got to do a select 4 as D, and then we can end it. And now we have to do URL encoding. And normally I just right click. I'm sure if this works. I'm going to copy this before I do it. And then we can do convert selection, URL, all characters. Validation error. Name must contain letters, numbers, apostrophes. IPsec, union, select star. I am not sure where we violated the Pydantic. Did I do like a double %? Because that's probably what happened. I URL encoded the %, so it sent a %. There we go. That works. But to me, that isn't readable. Oh God. Oh God. I don't know what just happened. There we go. So what I'm going to do is copy my request, and I'm just going to go down to a terminal, and I can do echo the request, and I'm going to use sed, and I'm going to say all spaces now become %20. And this is a bit more readable if we don't URL encode every single character. And again, I can't just do that because pluses are bad. It don't work with this. So go here, paste, and we have it. And of course, if you wanted to take data from like information schema or something, you just put it where this select is. Maybe we have to add double quotes. I don't think you would have to. You could probably do single quotes and everything. ABC like this. I just screwed my whole thing up. There we go. I had got rid of the parenthesis. So you could use single quotes. You don't need double quotes. So that is the how to do SQL injection without using any commas. Hopefully that was enjoyable. But now let's go and just look at this and harden it with Snyk and try to do what it says. So it wanted us to use prepared statements here. To do that, it should be relatively simple. We're going to get rid of passing a parameter inside the statement. And then I want to say SQL Alchemy, you do colon and then the variable you want to call it. I'm going to do user here because that's going to probably make a little bit more sense in a minute. And then I'm going to do a comma after this text. So the text is my SQL statement. And then we do a comma and give it a dictionary. And we're going to say user is the username variable. So what I did here is these two parameters match up. And then username is what's getting passed from the user. So if we save this, then press F5 again, we can go to Burpsuite, and this payload previously worked, and now it errors out. I'm not sure why it errored, actually. I actually was not expecting the error, but what was it doing? Mapping a list expected for parameters. Did I screw this up? Do I want username? I was expecting the application to give me null. This mapping a list. So we did text. Username. I was pretty sure it wanted a dict. Let's see. The text is closed out. I'm actually going to pause recording and figure this out instead of wasting more time. So I don't have a solution yet, but as soon as I hit pause, I realized something I could have done. So we have this. It is giving us that weird mapping index error, right? So what I'm going to do is highlight this code, and I'm going to go to Copilot Chat, and I'm going to ask Copilot, how can I fix this line? And then I'm going to paste this. Let me make sure I copy that. Copy. I get this error. And I'm going to ask Copilot if it will fix us. Okay. Username. So it says in the code provided, it looks like you're using a dictionary to pass parameters to execute. However, dictionary keys, username. Oh, I am an idiot. I was doing a comma, not a colon. I don't know why I was doing that. That'll fix it. There we go. We get null because this is no longer injectable. It's just saying, hey, that user does not exist. There we go. So that fixes that. And now Snyk, if we go, it's going to scan the code for vulnerabilities, and it will no longer find any SQL injection. It definitely helps if you do syntax correctly, but hey, you guys got to see Copilot Chat and how helpful it can be. It definitely saves me time for just fixing those stupid small things. It discovers those typos really nicely. So definitely worth signing up for. I think that's in beta still. So I think you just have to sign up, you get on a waiting list, and then get approved like a month or two later. It's still scanning for vulnerabilities in the code. It's going to find a cross-site scripting here, I believe. Let's see. Let's click this, and maybe it got hung somewhere. I'm going to change the output. Let's see. How do I change the terminal it's looking at? Output. Debug. I am not sure. So problems. Nothing from Snyk yet. It's still scanning. It normally doesn't take this long, I thought. So I am going to pause. We're going to let it finish scanning for vulnerabilities. Maybe something on this VM is going slow. But once we resume, we'll find out if Snyk has decided this vulnerability has been patched, and then also go and try to fix anything else it says. Okay, it is now done. I had to restart Visual Studio Code. Something hung up in code. The thing I was looking for was the Snyk output. And if you go to the output thing, click on this combo box. There's actually a scroll that I did not notice a second ago. And you can click here and see the status of everything. And it was saying the code scan was complete, but it wasn't showing here. So this was just a Visual Studio Code bug we saw before. And there's one vulnerability, this json.dumps, and we see it may result in cross-site scripting. So if we look, it wants us to use an html.escape. So we can say, let's see, json.dumps is probably going to be a string. So we can just say HTML escape here, save it, and we probably have to import HTML. Oh, I already do have it imported. So now we can run this file. And when we go and grab a user, let's see what happens. Nothing looks different, but if I look in the source, we can see it is going to be entity encoding all of the HTML characters. So this output can no longer be cross-site scriptable. I'm guessing if we could put cross-site scripting in the username or email parameter, then it would have been injectable. But now, no longer is. So definitely check out Snyk if you haven't. Hopefully this video has helped you understand SQL injection a little more. I'm probably going to do another one of Boolean injection in a little bit. So if you want to see that, make sure you leave a comment down below. It definitely does help me. Take care, guys, and I'll see you all next time.